Okay, so I think Brittany is being added. I'm the feedback. Like I added.
Okay, cool. Can you
Cool,
hear me?
cool. Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, very good. Okay. So I'm not getting any feedback. I had to get my daughter's phone. I, I guess I need an upgrade. Uh,
It be like that sometimes.
oh,
Sometimes you just got to do it.
you know, I've been holding on to this phone too because I was like, because I have like a Samsung, and I was like, should I get an iPhone or should I just, get another Samsung? So I have an upgrade, but I didn't get it yet because I wasn't sure. I guess this confirmed it.
Get the iPhone. Get with the
Yes.
team.
So I'm definitely gonna get the iPhone. I think I was able to share. Look, I feel fancy now. Like, I think I, I think I was able
Right.
to share it to the Bridges Book Club too. So hopefully,
Okay, excellent.
yeah. So hopefully, like we got everything. I was gonna move the camera, but I'm like, no, I'm not even going. Thank you,
That's
everybody
funny.
who came back. Hi, Hamadi. Hi, David. Thank you so much. Hi, Kimberly, Tracy. Good looking out, y'all. Y'all's troopers, so I really appreciate y'all. So now we're going to get this party started, right? We're going to get this party started quickly. So you know what? That reminds me of Thug Life. So, Whitney, let's start there. How about that? Why don't you introduce people to Thug Life and exactly what that means to you?
Okay, so when I was 18, I got Thug Life tatted on my chest. It was partially a dare and partially, sometimes people do things when they want to make a change for themselves. For me, it was something that was a little bit more permanent. So I really admired Tupac. Like, I just thought that he was like this revolutionary person. He just did whatever he wanted to do. He spoke the
Yes.
truth. And I was like, yes. Like, I even had the nose ring to go with it at one point. But I got a tattoo when I was 18 and it says Thug Life. But it doesn't mean what his Thug Life means. It stands for truthful, humble, unique, and genuine life.
Yes.
And I got that, and I got it as a permanent place on my body because that is how I want to live my life. Like, those are the principles that guide my life now, because I felt like, sometimes you go through life and if you don't establish values for yourself, it can kind of feel like you're just going through the motions. But once it clicked and I got that light bulb moment, that is what Thug Life truly meant to me. I wanted my own definition of life, and it just happened to spell thug, and I just rolled with it. And I love Tupac, so
Yeah.
it just worked well.
Me against the world. So, definitely. So that kind of reminds me, just like throughout the book, and what I know of you is that, and you talked about this in the book, just having kind of a rebellious spirit, always
Mm-hmm.
wanting to do well in school and, not going, too outside the box, but just that rebellious spirit of doing things your own way and, wanting to kind of figure out life on your own. And I think that really speaks to the entrepreneurial spirit and all the things that are coming about for you in your life now. Now, earlier I had to leave, so I definitely want to ask you again to talk a little bit about your journey, but just some of the things that we've seen you doing recently. Like, you are really booked and busy. We've seen you, take a couple of trips on the cover of a magazine, go to the conference. I'm always seeing you in pictures and different things at events that that you're a part of or hosting and what have you. So just talk a little bit about how you're able to maintain that lifestyle and kind of create a balance as well.
Well, long story short, I started to become an entrepreneur in 2015. I lived in Cincinnati, Ohio at the time. So shout out to anyone from Cincinnati. That was my home for 3 years. And before I left Cincinnati, I worked as the associate director of marketing for a nonprofit organization. I was the only female, one of the only African Americans in like an executive leadership position. And I was literally the youngest person there. So I was 25 years old, and I decided that I just wanted to change for myself. So I decided one day, literally woke up one day and was like, I'm going to start a business and I'm leaving my job. And I'm like, what am I doing? So it's so funny, but at the same time, different opportunities were coming about. So I actually started to teach at a media school in Dayton. So
Mm-hmm.
literally, I left my full-time job and would commute 45 minutes to Dayton, Ohio every day to teach social media. And it was something that was amazing. But at the same time, I was still building my business. Now, my first business that I started, it failed miserably. I'm not ashamed to say it. Before, I used to be like, oh my gosh, I can't say that out loud. But
Mm-hmm.
it failed. It wasn't what I thought it was going to be. But I started to work with a business coach who showed me like, hey, like you're really good at all this marketing stuff. Why don't you just go ahead and start doing that? So I started to do it. And when I started to do the work, it's like when you do good work, people start to refer you. So that's one of the things that have been a blessing for me. Like I market myself very indirectly. Like I show you what I'm doing, but I'm not like, hey, use my services. Hey, this is what I do, because there are people who advocate and do that for me, which I'm very grateful for. So essentially, to answer your question, how I'm booked and busy, as people like to say, I
Mm-hmm.
really just try to do really good work, because I know when you do really good work, people will spread that work to everyone else. Being consistent, even though I know that I'm not always consistently promoting myself, people need to see what it is that I do.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's really important that if you're adding value in the world, you should show people that you're adding value. I
Yes.
was mentioning earlier that before I never used to like to toot my own horn, because I thought, that wasn't appropriate to do. But I've realized that if you don't put yourself out there, then, how will people really be able to find you? How will people really be able to see what it is that you're doing? So, when I have the time, I try to show, like, the things that I show on social media is only a fraction of everything that I really do.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's really a small percentage. That's when I have time to actually post something. So that's one of my goals. And also it's just being consistent. A lot of times people start businesses and we're not consistent in showing people what it is that we're actually doing. So because I have this social media background and I've done it for other organizations, I know the importance of consistency, because consistency is how people are able to see you. We're in a world now where, everyone has access on social media. Everyone has the ability to start something or do that thing. But the people who really win at that are the people who are consistent and are always putting themselves out there. So that's something that I always try to keep at the top of my head.
Yes, definitely. And I think that is so important, just for your own business when you're getting started and you're moving forward. Our memory and our ability to recall something is so short that if we're not putting ourselves out there and letting people know that we're doing, then people are going to forget, like, oh, I was looking for an author, I was looking for a speaker, I was looking for somebody to do my website, but they're not sure of all the different things that we do unless
Mm-hmm.
we're sharing that information consistently. But even the bigger part of that, that I think is important, is when we share what it is that we're doing and we share our platforms, that lets other
Mm-hmm.
people see that they can achieve the same things. And
Mm-hmm.
the more you show yourself and the more you share your story, the more people who are going to be like, oh wow, you know what, I thought about doing that as well, or I think I want to be an entrepreneur as well. So it's not like they have this feeling like it's me against the world, because
Right.
we got people out here doing it and sharing their stories, like you share your story. So you are very open about a lot of the things that happen to you in your life, and we'll
Mm-hmm.
definitely get into some of those. But I want to ask some of the questions that people put on the website. So Nicole Brown Horston, she said, "What was the inspiration behind writing this awesome piece of work?" And then her second question was, "What problems does your book solve for new entrepreneurs?"
Okay, so I'll answer the first question. So the inspiration behind writing this book simply came from looking how other people were very open and transparent about their stories. I think a lot of times we go through life thinking that we're the only person who's been through something,
Mm-hmm.
and we don't realize that there are so many other people who have gone through the same thing. We almost kind of put ourselves in a box, not realizing that other people have had these experiences. So my inspirations literally have come from just watching other people come out of their shell and really explain where they've been and who they are. So that's really been something that was a turning point for me, because being a storyteller, telling your own personal story is transformative. I realize it's kind of like when you have a gift, like when you have a gift, it's something that's meant to be shared in the world. Because I feel like it's almost selfish not to tell our stories, because what you've been through can be somebody else's breakthrough, but you have to be the
Definitely.
person, who has that ability to say, all right, I'm going to be vulnerable and open enough to talk about where I've been. And, I have to have that responsibility to help somebody else grow. So that was really my inspiration, is just kind of looking around and meeting other people just through my personal experiences and my journey, and just being grateful for them to be able to share what they've shared with me. And that gave me the courage to share my own story.
Definitely, definitely. So the second part of that was, what problems does your book solve for new entrepreneurs?
So my book, is really personal development. A lot of people, and it's so funny, like I look at my book, I'll show you. So my book, it has me on the cover, it's me, it's pink, it's girly. People see skinny black girl, they're like, oh, this ain't for me. I ain't a skinny girl, but it's really a lot more than that. I purposely put myself on the book because a lot of times we judge a book by its cover.
Mm-hmm.
And I did that very much so intentionally. And you have to really look within the contents to really understand what it is that someone is trying to convey. Now, in terms of entrepreneurs, this book really is about helping you figure out who you are. So I tell a story about how when I was a little girl, I was 8 years old, I was bullied by this boy. He told me that I was ugly. That was the first time anyone had ever said that to me. And, everything happened. He bullied me. We got into a fight. That came and went. But, even though those scars from that fight healed, those words never healed to me. That was something that was always scarred in my head. So I call something going back to you 1.0. So going back to the you before you've had that experience that changed how you felt about yourself. So my goal is to really help people get back to a place of having good self-confidence, so that way they can do whatever it is that they need to do. Because at the end of the day, I feel like if you're not at 100% or somewhere close to that, how can you build a business that's at 100%? If you're not dealing with the personal baggage in your life, you can't run a successful business and be excellent at doing what you do. So my hope is that when people read this book, they have a personal reflection and analysis of their own life and figure out how do they play a role in their own life and what can they do, what is in their control to change that moving forward.
Definitely, definitely. And I know another thing in your book, and something that you continue to work on, is something that I do. Like, how you write about something or you talk about something, and then years later, you're like, oh, I'm going to go back to this and I'm going to, work on this some more. Is your SMART goals and your smarter goals, and like a way for people to plot out the different aspects of their lives holistically, so that they can, work on those things, have something written out, and kind of, move forward, and it, not just be in their head, but something written out and made plain that they consistently follow.
Absolutely. And I on my podcast, I did an episode about that. And one of the things that I came across in my research is that out of the entire population, only 3% of people actually write down their goals.
Mm-hmm.
14% of people have a goal in mind. Definitely, it just stays in their head. And then the rest of the world, we're just kind of going with the flow. Like, we know that we're supposed to have.
Okay. Did she froze on mine? Is she frozen on you guys? Okay. Whitney. Oh, I think we lost her. Mm, okay, I think we lost her. Can you guys still hear me? Okay. So I okay. Yeah, let me see if I can add you back. So it's asking me, like, do I want to bring other people on camera? Uh, let me see. Whitney.
Okay.
Okay.
Great. I don't know what happened. It's like it
Yeah,
froze and then
it just
it
went
just went
out.
out.
Technical
I
difficulties.
know, but
Okay.
we're working it out. We'll work through it.
Yes, definitely. So keep telling us about writing out those goals.
So with writing the smarter goals, so the smarter goals is actually a model that's been adopted. Well, I kind of took it and remixed it and made it smarter because they derive from the SMART goals. And the SMART goals were created from the Harvard Business School in the 1960s. And it was really just a
Mm-hmm.
way to help people evaluate how well they were doing in business. So a lot of business coaches and just life coaches in general have adopted that model to help you look at how you do goal setting, because it's so easy for us to say, oh, I want to write a book, right? But what are those
Mm-hmm.
steps that you're going to take in between to write a book? How is it even realistic for you? What's going to be the timetable? If plan A doesn't work out, how are you going to create a plan B? So that's what smarter goals are really for. It's really just a way to help you look at how you're going to get from point A to point B successfully and looking at those little steps in
Definitely.
between. So
Definitely.
smarter goals, they play a role in my life because before, the only things that I would think about is career, because that's how I was taught. My mind was always,
Mm-hmm.
when you leave, get a job, be successful. And success was always to me rooted in my career. And I've learned that success is much more than just what I do. Success is finding this peace in who you are. So that's something that has become a part of my goals regularly. So when I'm planning those things, like, oh, I'm planning out my finances, my career, my everything else, I'm also planning how do I want to feel as a person too, because I think that's something that's most important.
Yes, definitely. So I definitely want to get into more things about the book specifically. And Sherry Brooks, she asked this question. So she said, in chapter 4, you were very frank about sexuality and sexually transmitted disease and other things that can occur, when you're sexually active.
Mm-hmm.
And what gave you the courage to write about that part of your journey?
Because we don't talk about it. It is what it is. I mean, I think most people who know me, most people see the version of me today. Most people see the really happy, bubbly person. I'm always smiling, always happy. But there was a very dark part of my life where, it made me feel like I didn't want to be alive. That part and that piece included. Sexually transmitted diseases are things that we don't talk about in society. We know that they're there. We know that they exist, but we kind of just play it off as something that people keep under the rug. But I think it's one of those conversations that we need to have up front, because I remember, and I don't think I mentioned this, but I remember one of the times I worked with a doctor, and it was an African American male doctor. And he was just like, you know what, no glove, no love. He was really one of the first people who embedded in me about the importance of self-worth. It was a doctor telling me this as he's
Mm-hmm.
giving me my test results. And I'm like, wow, this is deep. Most doctors are just like very plain, dry, straight to the point. But he actually had
Right.
some empathy of where I was. So this was very
Mm-hmm.
important to me because I know a lot of young girls have read my book, girls who are in their teens and girls who may be going through some of those things. They might be thinking about the decision to have sex. So I just want people to keep in mind that things like STDs are very real. These are things that can
Mm-hmm.
change your life. Sometimes they're curable, sometimes they're not. And if they are curable, you still have to have that thought of knowing that, hey, like I've been through this before. And that was something that I couldn't get over for years. So I really wanted to make sure that this was a piece of my book because, again, this was a very intimate piece of my life that changed me. It
Mm-hmm.
was an eye opener. It made me look at my relationships a lot differently. It made me look at how I treated myself differently. And it all boils down to, how much you respect yourself. And I think, especially with safe sex is respecting yourself. It's making sure that you're not setting yourself
Definitely.
up for any type of vulnerabilities with your health.
Definitely. And I love what you said about something that there's certain things that we don't talk about. And because we don't talk about them, they just carry shame. And when we like just carry shame, sometimes we feel frozen, like we can't really move forward and do anything about it because we have all this shame over top of us. And so we can't take care of things. Like I see billboards now talking about sexually transmitted diseases where you have to put it on a billboard because nobody's sitting around the table talking about it. Nobody's in the car driving talking about it. So you got to let people know that this is something that's going on and that's prevalent, and that there's help, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm so glad that you were able to, reveal that in your book. One of the other things that you talked about was journeying through the experience of having an abortion.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something I can definitely relate to. And one of the questions that comes to my mind is why we don't hear that much about the trauma that a lot of women experience after making that choice.
Mm-hmm.
Like usually, even with like pro life and everything like that, they talk about the aspect of the baby, which is important, and I'm sure that's a lot of where the pain comes from for the mother. But I don't think women realize that it could be a traumatic experience that, like you were told you're going to need therapy after this, and something that can really take us into a deep depression. So why do you think that we don't talk about that part of that choice?
Abortion is a very sensitive topic that I think a lot of people want to forget. Like, I think a lot of people don't want to acknowledge that they've been through that. And people don't want to think that it's a part of their journey. So I remember the first time that I was asked to speak about my book in Cincinnati. I spoke in front of a group of about 16 women. And the stat that's out there currently is 1 out of 4 women have experienced an abortion. And out of those 16 women, 4 of them came up to me at the end of my discussion to say, hey, I've been through this, literally had tears in their eye. And they're like, man, you talked about it. I haven't thought about it since it's happened to me. And abortion is something that affects people very differently. For me, it was
Mm-hmm.
something that was very traumatic, eye-opening, and life-changing for me. And there's some people, I've had friends who have had multiple abortions and it doesn't faze them. So it really just depends on the person that you talk to. I think we don't talk about the psychological emotions of it. Again, it's just because people just simply don't talk about it. They don't say that they are experiencing something. They don't say that they're hurting from that experience. But in reality, I think it's very important for us to talk about these things because it does affect how you think about things. It affects how your relationships with other people. For me,
Mm-hmm.
it was really bad for me. My abortion happened on May 22nd, 2009. And I can honestly say every year since that date is very different. Like there have been days I'll wake up in a cold sweat crying because I know that it's that day. And there's other days I feel very strong and I feel good. Like I feel like, okay, I've conquered it. I just never know how it's going to hit me every year. So I think it's very important, especially for me, because I'm married now. My husband knows, about all of that stuff. I've been very transparent
Mm-hmm.
with him since the beginning. It's very helpful in my relationships with other people, so they can kind of know how I'm dealing with things at that moment. So people know during that time of year that's something that's very sensitive to me. Like I have people call me, reach out, and it's just helpful throughout your life. I just feel like when you talk about
Mm-hmm.
it and when you include others and how you feel about that particular situation, it could be something that's very releasing instead of trying to deal with it on your own because it's not easy to deal with on your own.
Definitely very good. And I like that in your book as well. You talk about not just sharing information in a book, but sharing it with your loved ones, sharing it with the therapist, sharing it with your church family and what have you, and just having a network of support and how important that is. And a
Right.
lot of us, we don't, we hold things in and we don't want to talk about what's going on in our lives.
Right.
And
There's
that's something I
oh, I'm sorry. I just wanted to say,
no, go right ahead.
there's something that I mentioned in my book. So on Kendrick Lamar's Damn album, he has a song called Ain't Nobody Praying for Me. And that song always resonated with me because it's like people can't pray for you if they don't know what to pray for. So it's really
Mhm.
important to understand that regardless if it's abortion, any kind of traumatic experience that you've had in your life, you have to let people know where you're coming from because otherwise they can't pray for you. They can't help you if they don't know where you're coming from.
Definitely, definitely. So, I do want to ask this. You talked a little bit about, your book cover, and you look beautiful, and it is pink, and you got your braid, and your head is slung back, and everything. So when we tell our stories, when women tell our stories, often we get accused of male bashing.
Mm-hmm.
And I know in your book, I mean, you just share your truth. And a lot of that, you bring up some things with your father, with your husband, and then what you call situationships, and then even, like the sexual assault situation.
Mm-hmm.
So, what would you say to men? Do you think that your book is a book that they should read, that they should pick up, or, um, you know? What would you say?
I think so. I think, and I've had men who have actually read my book, and it's been something that's eye opening for them, especially for those who have daughters. But it's also really important for men to kind of go through it just to see it from a different perspective. I think a lot of times men have this perception of women that, you know, women are trying to like trap them or they're trying to make them look in a certain way. And there are some women who do that. You know, there are some people who are malicious with intent, but there are many women who are not. There are many women who are just speaking about their truths. And it's just a harsh reality that a lot of people don't want to face, because a lot of times, you know, men, you know, men who are rapists or men who have done certain things are our friends, our fathers.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're people who have an active role in our lives. And it's important for us not to turn a blind eye to the actions of people that we love. So I think when we have an open mind and to understand what other people can go through and look at it from a different perspective, it can help us change our perspective, you know, and it can start conversations. I think some of these conversations that I'm having in the book are some conversations men need to have within themselves. You know, how do you treat women?
Definitely.
You know, how can women,
Mm-hmm.
like I was talking to one of my best friends the other day. We were watching a news report about a woman who had recently been raped in Atlanta. Someone in Atlanta was raped inside of a club. And, you know, we talk
Mm-hmm.
about
I
it,
heard about that.
and you know we talk about our experience at the club, about, you know, because I used to go out a ton, you know, like I was one of the biggest people. I partied every weekend. And you know,
Mm-hmm.
just the interactions that I would have with people in the club, you know, people who would just put their hands on you unwillingly. And that stems even further deep, you know, going back to middle school and elementary school. I remember
Yes.
boys touching us inappropriately, and we played it off because we thought that's just what they were supposed to do, well really we should have been like, no, we need to get an adult, we need to do something else. So I just think it's just
Mm-hmm.
important for men to kind of see where women come from so they can have those conversations amongst themselves to figure out where they truly stand in it. Because you really don't know until you've been through those situations.
Definitely. Okay. So, I wanted to ask you this, specifically about the sexual assault. So we're in the Me Too age, and it's a very sensitive topic. But a lot of people are feeling freer about coming out and sharing their stories and talking about their trauma. So in the book, you know, you talk about that experience. Can you share anything that somebody who has been through that, you know, some different things they might be able to do to kind of help them? Uh, you know, move forward and not fall into a depression
Mm-hmm.
or something else. Hmm.
Well, for me, no one deserves to be sexually assaulted or raped. But I think immediately when you're dealing with victims, victims usually blame themselves. They think about what they could have done differently. So for me, it was like I was on a date with, first of all, I wasn't even allowed to date. So I was on a date with a boy that I shouldn't even have been with anyway. So that was something that I used to play over and over in my mind. Just and that happened a lot with my mistakes. I would just think about things that my parents said, like, dang, they were right. But, you know, I couldn't tell them that they were right because I wanted to internalize it on my own. So for me,
Hmm.
the first thing that I would say is not your fault, because no one deserves what happens to them. And it's not you. You know, there's nothing wrong with you. It's something wrong with the person who has done that to you. It's something that they haven't addressed, something that they need to deal with. And that action is just them exerting themselves on you. It's the consequences of an unresolved problem that they have within themselves. So that is the first thing that I would say. And the other thing that I would say is, you know, you get through it. You know, there is a life after those things, and you have to kind of turn your turmoil into a testimony. It goes back to that premise of storytelling, to being able to tell your story. Because for me, my
Hmm.
motivation was, you know, I'm going to get through this. And when I get through this, I'm going to make sure I help somebody else. Because, you know, even after, you know, all of my experiences, you know, I usually ran across someone who had been through that thing. And once I started talking about it, not only was it healing for them, it was healing for me too. Every time I share my story, there's like another layer of healing that I go through. So I just think that it's really important for people who have been a part of this Me Too movement, to know that they're not by themselves. It's not their fault, and they
Yeah.
can get through it. And also, to speak about it sooner than later. I think now, because of the Me Too movement, it's open an opportunity for women to be more vocal about the things that have happened to them. Because before, if you said thing, they'll be like, "Oh, she's crying rape. She's saying whatever." And, you know, the woman is usually victimized. You know, they're usually put
Yes.
out and ridiculed for the things that have happened to them. But I think we're getting into a space now where speaking out is more socially acceptable. And I think people need to take advantage of that, you know, as we're going through this period of, you know, changing how we look at sexual assault.
Definitely, definitely. Okay, so I do kind of want to shift gears,
Mm-hmm.
and I have to ask you this. At one point in the book, you kind of like, put a halt to everything, and you assisted a woman with her political campaign.
Mm-hmm.
So I definitely want to ask you: do you have any political aspirations? Are you thinking about running for office at some point?
One day I would like to be the mayor of Columbus.
Yes, I
Mm-hmm.
knew it.
That's my goal. I've never said that out loud, but that's really my aspiration. I would love to be the mayor of Columbus, Ohio.
Oh, wonderful. And I think you would be an amazing mayor. I mean, I think as somebody who's from here, who, attended Columbus Public Schools, who went to college here, who went to a HBCU as well at Wilberforce, who has all these different experiences and, who is a young person who's in tune with what it is that's going on, but, very conscious and very positive and very career oriented and willing to share, because I think what happens with a lot of politicians, they put on a mask, in order to get that certain position, and it's sometimes something that they can't hold on to and carry. But for you being so transparent, I think you would be an amazing candidate. So I definitely wanted to ask you
Oh
that.
yeah,
um,
that's my goal. When I'm not 30 yet. I only turned 28, but in my 30s, by the time I'm 35, I'd like to run for mayor of Columbus, Ohio. Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. Well, you definitely have my vote. And then also, what else are you working on now? Are you working on another book?
Yes. So I'm actually writing another book. This book is called Can I Pick Your Brain? And it is a guide for young professionals and entrepreneurs to help establish their professional worth. And this book is another piece of my life that I've learned. You know, Skinny Black Girl's Guide to Freedom was all about self-confidence, finding myself. But a lot of people don't look at how they find themselves professionally. I've made a lot of
Hmm.
mistakes in my career, especially in my early 20s, because people be like, well, can I pick your brain about this? Like, I've done a lot of free work. I've probably done over $100,000 worth of free work in my career. If I
Hmm.
add the hours and put an hourly wage to everything, I've done a lot to help other people build. And not to say that you shouldn't help, because I think you should always have a serving mindset. But at the end of the day,
Hmm.
when we go into business, we go into business to make profit. We want to go into business to make
Yes.
money. And it's very important to understand how you can establish those professional boundaries so you can achieve that goal of creating a profit. So, Can I Pick Your
Hmm.
Brain is really just, it's a series of interviews that I've had with other professionals, and interweave with my own personal experiences to help you understand how you can charge what you need to charge, how you can have those difficult conversations with people, and ultimately, how do you create relationships that are not one-sided and can fulfill both sides of the parties.
Okay, definitely. And I just want to say this is that sometimes we think when we're sharing information and giving it freely that we're being selfless,
Mm-hmm.
but I think of it as we're being selfish, because unless we give ourselves the opportunity to grow, and that's financially and our platforms, then we're missing out on reaching and helping so many other people.
Mm-hmm.
So just by giving everything away, that's just a way to keep us small and keep us limited. But if you want to have a reach, if you want to be able, to extend yourself to more people and assist more people, you have to have a platform that grows, and it has to grow financially as well. So I definitely agree that we have to put a price tag on what it is that we're providing and what it is that we're serving. Um, I do want to ask you this. I know you have multiple skill sets and multiple streams of income. The speakerozzi, the podcasting, which you do as far as videography, which you do as social media, websites, marketing, branding, all these different things. Give me two that really stand out to you that are kind of like your favorites, and give us a little bit of information as to why.
Oh wow, my favorites. Well, I like everything that I do, but if I had to put them into a favorite category, I definitely love video. Videography is something, well, I don't know if I mentioned before, but my background is in news, right? So when I first started my career, I moved to Cincinnati and worked as a digital content producer for Fox 19. So I wrote stories for the web. I learned how to manage the largest Facebook community out of all the news stations at that time. Well, I worked the assignment desk, went out with
Amazing.
reporters. So I learned a lot about storytelling and how to tell a story very quickly. So videography is something that's really good because in video, you can capture those moments and capture things that a lot of times the event organizers don't see because they're busy trying to figure out what they need to do. So I love being able to capture the things that people didn't expect to see. The other thing that I really, really enjoy doing, I love podcasting. Podcasting has something that has been
Yeah.
my baby. It's good for me because I get to, I love podcasting for Pink Lemonade because I get to internalize. That's my time to reflect. I move so much, I don't think about things. So when I'm podcasting, that's really my alone time that I'm just sharing with the world. That's me reflecting on how I'm thinking about life in that moment. So I would say those are the two things that I love doing the most.
Okay, very good. So we're going to close it out. Is there anything that you want to say before we end the broadcast?
I would just like to say thank you first and foremost for having me. Thank you to everyone in the Bridges Book Club who has purchased a book via Amazon or via the website. It really makes my heart full that you guys have been able to support. And I'm so excited to support the other authors as we keep going through this journey. Stephanie, kudos to you for creating this platform. I think this is going to change some lives and impact people in a way that we're probably not even thinking about at this moment. And I just want to say, my favorite saying in life is carpe diem, to seize the day. And regardless of what you go through, regardless of what happens to you, there's always an opportunity for you to start over. There's always an opportunity for you to change something. It's never too late to do the things that you want to do. So I just want to encourage you to make sure that, you're living in your truth and you're doing everything that makes you feel whole and that ultimately gets you back to that you 1.0.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you for being the first out the gate featured author of the Bridges Book Club. It was no easy feat. You didn't know what to expect. And I think you did an amazing job of showing up and sharing and just, letting people know that, you're here, you're excited. These are the things that you're doing. You share, pictures when you were traveling and different things like that. So I think that is amazing that you were able to, kind of show that balance, that you're able to do multiple things. And I appreciate your excitement and being on board. And I definitely, like I'm about to say, I want to have you back like I'm Oprah. I definitely would like to have you back. But I definitely want to get an opportunity to interview you again. And we can do it on different platforms and different things like that because I know you have so much to offer and so much to talk about. And definitely everybody gets this book. It was amazing. Yes, definitely get this book and let people know how they can connect with you.
You can connect with me. I'm Whitney L. Barkley everywhere on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Gmail. You can also connect and listen to my podcast at Pink Lemonade Podcast. I'm on SoundCloud, Apple
Yeah.
Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Anchor, a little bit of everywhere. Or if you want to read the blog, you can go to www.skinnyblackgirlscode.com.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for hanging out with us. I really appreciate you guys hanging in there. And we will definitely be back. I'll be over in the Bridges Book Club and in the comments down below. And I hope, Whitney will hang out with us a little bit too, just if anybody had any questions or just to, speak to you guys. Thank you so much.
Right.
And we're out.
Thank you.
Hug life. Bye.
Bye.